When it comes to the debate over Canada's population, there are really two things going on. There's the story you've probably heard a million times, and then there are the numbers. So today we're going to dig into the data to see what it really tells us about all this. So you turn on the TV, you scroll online, and you're almost guaranteed to see some version of this question. It's always framed as this urgent, ticking time bomb, a demographic crisis that we have to solve right now. But is that what's actually happening? Okay, so let's start with that story, the one we all hear. The narrative goes something like this. Canada has an aging population, our workforce is shrinking, and because of that, we desperately need high levels of immigration. It's presented as the only solution. And you see this exact framing everywhere, right? It makes immigration sound like it isn't just a policy choice, but an absolute necessity. We need it to keep the country running, to pay for pensions, to fill all these jobs. It's a really powerful and, honestly, a very persuasive argument. But what happens when we actually look past the headlines? This is where it starts to get really interesting. We're just going to hit pause on that whole narrative for a second and look at the cold, hard data, a snapshot of Canada's population as it is, right here, right now. Now, what's really fascinating about this chart is the structure it shows us. Sure, we have about 8.1 million retirees. But look at the working age population. We've got roughly 11.2 million people between 40 and 64 and another 11.3 million between 18 and 39. I mean, that is a huge, healthy base of working age people. If you're going to remember just one thing from this whole explainer, please make it this number, 2.8. This little number is basically the key to understanding this entire situation. So what does it actually mean? Well, it's what's called the dependency ratio, and it's a brilliant way to see the balance in the system. What it means is that right now, in Canada, there are 2.8 working-age adults for every single person over the age of 65. So here's the crucial point. A ratio of 2.8 is not a system in crisis. Not at all. It's actually a strong, stable number. It's more than enough to support our social programs and our economy as they exist today. The numbers just don't point to some immediate demographic emergency. Okay, so if the current population is actually pretty stable, where is all this urgency coming from? Well, a lot of it is tied to the recent, and I mean very recent, spike in immigration levels. It's so important to understand this is not a long-term trend. This timeline lays it out perfectly. You see, before 2020, immigration levels were holding relatively steady. Then, of course, COVID hit, and everything dipped as travel shut down. But just look at what happened in mid-2021 when those restrictions were lifted. Boom. A sharp, dramatic spike that has basically just kept on going. And here we can put some hard numbers on that. Before the pandemic, Canada was bringing in, on average, around 275,000 people a year. Post-COVID, that number shot up to an average of around 450,000. That's a massive increase, and it happened incredibly quickly. And this brings us right to the heart of the whole debate. It's not really about one set of facts versus another. It's really a conflict between two different ways of looking at time, the long-term future versus what's happening in the present day. Think of it like this. On one side, you have the narrative of urgency. It's driven by these long-term projections. It's like a crystal ball trying to see decades into the future. But on the other side, you have the hard data of today, which, as we've just seen, tells a story of a stable and self-sustaining system. The entire debate really hinges on which one of these stories you decide to focus on. So what do we take away from all this? If we strip away the predictions about the future, if we look past the media framing, what does the current data actually tell us about Canada's population? The findings are actually pretty clear. 1, Canada currently has a large and healthy working-age population. 2, that dependency ratio, that 2.8 workers for every retiree, it's solid. 3, the huge spike in immigration is a super recent thing, not some historical pattern. And maybe most importantly, 4, the fears of a demographic crisis, they're driven by long-term projections, not our present-day reality. Let me put it as plainly as I possibly can. Based on the current numbers, Canada's population is demographically self-sustaining. We already have the working-age adults and the young people inside our borders right now to keep the system going. And that leaves us with a final, really crucial question. If the numbers show that our current demographic situation is not a crisis, and if the whole narrative of urgency is based on projections about the future, then what is the real driver behind this recent, historic surge in immigration? That is the question worth thinking about.